So if there's like a long weird pause or something, don't worry about it.
Okay. Oh, we don't have the
Phone's on.
but this isn't on.
Oh.
Will this bother you, Kymber?
No.
Okay.
It's fine.
Danielle, tell me when it's too bright for you.
That's fine.
Okay. Perfect. It's for you.
Do I have to press something when I use it? or
It's
just
on already. It's not recording yet. Can you talk into it so I can hear?
Test 1, 2, 3. Just keep talking.
My name's Kymber.
My name is Kymber. Nice to meet
That's perfect. Okay, this is me. Danielle, your turn.
Hello, hello.
Well,
I
again,
can't hear myself. Oh, there. It's a little bit better.
you're on a 0. That's why.
Oh,
I'm too loud.
Too loud. 3. You're on a 3.
I know. Can I be on a 2? I
Wow.
feel like I'm screaming at myself.
Okay, I'm on a 4. Kymber, one more time.
I'm curious. I have an appointment at 3. You think we'll be done by then?
Like, are you leaving?
No, it's here, but
Okay.
So if we're done by 2:30.
yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, I
Okay.
literally can just jump right on. Like it.
Okay, yeah, no,
Yeah.
we'll totally be done.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just realized that.
And we'll all keep an eye on the time to make sure.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
We'll be mindful of that.
I
Thanks for
ramble,
telling us.
so. Like
We'll just give you a wrap it up.
Okay. All right, we're on.
Okay.
Hi, Kymber.
Hi, Savannah. Hi, Danielle.
Thank you so much for talking with us today.
You're welcome. This
So
is
exciting for
This is
this.
exciting. It's also nice to have you in my room. This is
I
It's
know.
a very unique experience. I wasn't sure what I was getting myself into.
And you have such a cozy room, so I feel like I'll just
Yeah.
like take a nap at the end.
Yeah. It's definitely.
Rooms that are spacious are so much like nicer. I feel like when I lived in San Luis Obispo, I had a room that had like space to it, and I don't know. It's just so much nicer than being in a cramped
It feels
space.
like a little sanctuary.
I know.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of windows.
I spend a lot of time in here. This is where I see clients as well. This is like my office.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I try to be intentional with how I set it up.
Did you?
Yeah.
And you moved here fairly recently, right? Or no?
3 years.
Okay. Fairly recently. You're like, no.
Where have you been, Selena?
The last
last
time-
3 years.
Yeah, I was at your other space. I guess
Yeah.
literally like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Now. So
Yeah.
my bad.
2017.
Are
Wow.
you from
18.
Slow originally?
I'm originally from Slow. I mean,
Wow.
I lived in, my parents were a little bit of gypsies, and they're originally from Alabama, and then they settled in Northern California in Mendocino, and I was there until I was about 5, and then we moved to Pismo. And I was in Pismo until I was 20, and then, no, Pismo until I was 13, and then Slow until I was 20. And now I'm back.
Where were you? You left at 20? You went somewhere else?
Yeah, I went to the San Francisco Bay Area. So
Okay.
mostly like Berkeley, Oakland, but I also lived in San Francisco for a little while.
What brought
Yeah.
you back?
I was just tired of the city. I think I was just like burnt out with the pace of the city and the work I was doing at the time. I was already trained as a nutritionist and was like in health coaching training and working full time as a doula and doing some nanny work, and just like the distance of commuting for work and the distance of commuting to see friends and the pace and the white noise, and I was just over it. And so
Yeah, it takes you like 15 minutes to go like a mile.
yeah, it does. It takes you like an hour to commute everywhere. And it was just
Uh-huh.
like really exhausting, and my nervous system was like over it. And I went to kind of an extreme, and I moved onto my friend's property into a teepee. And so it was
Like
a unique,
complete
so cool.
opposite.
yeah, I didn't have internet access. I didn't have like Wi-Fi. I didn't have cell phone reception, and it was a unique opportunity that I wanted to jump on. So
Nice.
Yeah.
How long were you in the TV?
like an hour and a half.
You're like, all right, I need Wi-Fi again. That's enough.
Like a year and a half. A year and a half.
That's so funny. Oh
Yeah.
gosh.
It wasn't practical. Like I was training to be a health coach online, and I had to do all of my classwork and stuff, and I needed internet access every day. So I would like go to cafes to work. And yeah, there was after a year and a half. It was also interesting because I wasn't prepared. Someone had asked me before I moved, oh, you're moving into a teepee. Isn't that going to be like difficult, like cold? And I was like, it's Central California during a drought. Like, how bad can it be? And then that was in the end of 2016. And then that whole year was like really rainy and stormy and crazy. And it was like, wow, I didn't know what I was getting into. Like there was times when I had to sleep indoors. In my friend's house that owned the property because I was afraid of being in the teepee because of how the wind would shake it. And like if it was raining and it was really, really windy, then it was just like,
would it flood?
It would, yeah, around the outside. Like there was a middle part of it that would stay dry, but I had to pretty much put all of my stuff into like plastic bins.
Wow.
And yeah, it was like it was kind of bare bones. Actually, some friends moved into it after I moved out, and they like really made it their own. Like they set up an outdoor kitchen and they like put all their furniture in there. And I don't know how they did it because I felt like I couldn't have anything nice in there without it just getting like covered in water and mud and stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Full-time camping.
yeah, it was full-time camping for sure. Yeah. And it was in some ways it was really exciting. And like I would go to bed at like 8, I had like a bunch of fake candles that I would use to read and in bed. And I had to have a bed with like the what is it called? Like a
canopy
bed.
Yeah.
And then I had to have a mosquito net around it because bugs would fall on me from the ceiling
my
while I was sleeping. You learn these things the hard way. And
like I can do it, and then you're there and you're like, whoa.
Like, wow, there's like bugs all over me. And so yeah, so I'd go to bed at like 8 and just lay in bed and read and just be really cold. And I mean, again, like it's like you think about it and it's like, oh, that's really exciting, but it was to some extent, but it was also like, difficult and lonely and like physically uncomfortable.
Totally.
Yeah.
The you went from like one end of the spectrum to the other. You were like city life, overstimulation, and then you like move outside.
And I didn't know how to like handle the first few months. It was like so quiet that I like didn't know really how to handle it. I was like so uncomfortable with the level of stillness that I definitely had to face.
Well, can you tell us about your upbringing a little bit and how you just, a little bit more about Kymber?
Okay. Yeah, my upbringing was a little bit different. Like I'm the middle of 5 kids and we were all born at home unassisted. And my parents were part of like a small religious group that traveled to California from Alabama. And the first 5 years of my life was spent in Mendocino on this property that like kind of isolated in the redwoods where this community squatted for 7 years and fought the government around the land usage and then built houses. And so I was pretty isolated in the redwoods at that point. And then when I was about 5, we moved to Pismo and continued to be like unschooled. Like none of us were in school until my parents split up when I was 8, and then we were all just like thrown in school. And I think like I look back at a lot of like the traumas that I've been working through and like kind of just my outlook on life, and I can see how much of that period of my life was really that shaped me, and because of being kind of like a wild, kind of like a feral child in a sense. And then to go from that to like losing one of your parents and then being put into the system that you don't understand with like all of these other kids and these like authorities that you don't know. And it's interesting to like look at my resistance to authority and like mistrust of institutions and kind of like a preference for more natural spaces and like where all that comes from.
Yeah, because you were kind of on the outside looking in. Just so interesting because when you're raised in it, you're like, oh, this is the way it was not my normal. I still have this like recently in therapy I was talking about how I have this like theme of like, am I doing it right? Like it comes up for me, and I think that's from like being kind of that weird schooled girl that was like isolated. These norms that other kids share that you don't have, and you're like, you can feel your difference, and you're always kind of wondering like, am I doing things right? Like, am I socializing in the right way? Like, am I presenting myself in the right way? Like, and so there's like, stuff that I've worked through in my life as an adult of like not feeling like an outsider, being okay with like not inherently trusting groupthink, and just feeling like, I guess, a little bit more critical of norms.
Mm-hmm.
than I
Do you
probably
feel
otherwise would.
like a lot of yourself had to be shifted and changed? Like, you hide a lot of your like authenticity to feel like you need to fit in?
I used to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely like went to a pretty dark place with it, and I feel like a lot of my healing work has been in like embracing kind of my weirdness, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
That's why I like you.
thank you.
I'm like, we were talking about it we did an Aquarius season episode, and like I feel like, and that's the season we're in right now.
Mhm.
And a characteristic of that time is like embracing your authentic kind of eccentric self.
Mhm.
And I was saying, like, all of my friends are like, I use the term weird like out of endearment, and I
Mhm.
love people who are a little just different.
Mhm.
So anyway, that makes sense why I like you so much. 'Cause
Yeah.
you weren't brought up in the norm.
No, I wasn't, and my family is very. And I also have noticed that I have this thing, like weird shaming. That's weird. Like I've had people do that to me, and I've noticed that it really affects me. Like, and so I am cautious not to tell someone that they're weird in a way that would be like a judgment, you know.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
because I genuinely think that people do that, and that feeling of like shame of being different that can be associated with being weird is, I think it can really inhibit people from actually like knowing themselves and growing and knowing and being like a free thinker and knowing what they actually think about something.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I
Yeah.
agree. So how did you get into the health world?
Well, like so many people, my health wasn't great, and so like when I think I had a lot of health issues when I was a kid that were kind of like normalized, you know, like if you have a headache, you'll get a headache medicine or pain med or whatever, and so so I had some health issues when I was a kid that then as I grew into my teens got more obvious, like mood disorder type stuff and skin issues. And so from the age of like 15 to 20, I was on a whole cocktail of pharmaceuticals. So I took antibiotics for 4.5 years straight for my skin, which is actually really common. A lot of people, but especially women, are still doing that based on what their dermatologist, you know, prescribes them. And then I was on antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds, which also doubled for OCD. And then I was on ADD medication for 2.5 years through college, for the first section of college. And then when I got to be about 20, I had already been doing a lot of like self-exploration, but I was not really, it wasn't like from a holistic place. And I also had an eating disorder as well. So when I was about 20, I realized like I can't be on these meds anymore. Like I feel toxic. And and I had this belief that I couldn't function without them. They were like holding me together and especially like helping me through college. And so I was like, if I can't do this without all of these meds, then I need to do something completely different. And so I read this magazine. It was like a massage therapy magazine. And I just had this like, I had this like epiphany, like I need to become a massage therapist. Funny because I never worked as a massage therapist, but it was like a very extreme other side of what I was doing. Like I was very intellectual and was in school and like learning a lot in my head all the time. And over the next like 4 months, I tapered off of every med and then didn't finish college. So I dropped out like a few semesters. Well, maybe actually it was like a year before I would have graduated, and moved to San Francisco, went to holistic health school. And so that was when I was 20 and almost 21. And in that year, I got exposed to the concept of holistic for the first time. And so just the idea that like your mind and your body are connected, that every system in your body is connected, that like spiritual and emotional shit will affect I just swear, I don't know if that's...
Oh, that's fine. We do that all the time.
Will affect like your organ systems. So there's all these things that I had been like so I used to say when I was a teenager, I love doctors, they have prescription pads. They're safe. And then I was like, that didn't work for me. And so and then in the first year or 2 years I was in the Bay Area, I was just like I was immersed in like all around woo. So I was immersed in like the most alternative of the alternative. And so I got a lot of like crystal healers and energy workers, and everyone was vegan, and everyone was cleansing, and it was just an interesting shift. And so I kind of had to like work my way through that world and my own health issues, which continued to deteriorate regardless of like how, you know, quote unquote health oriented I was, to kind of learn more about like what does and doesn't work. And I went back to school for like dietetics, because I thought I was convinced that I needed to have a dietetics license in order to actually help people and be like legit, like not just be like another person who makes up their training, who makes up their, like, you know, I'm a coach, here's my card. I went to like an online weekend course. And but I really don't like school all that much. Like I'm a self-directed learner, and so I put myself through the first 2 years of the hard sciences for my dietetics license and got my associates of science, and then just kind of had like a realization that dietetics wasn't for me. And so I went to a holistic nutrition school, and and that was like in my, you know, second half of my 20s. And it's just been this like evolving thing ever since. I personally like don't, like having my own business is a very new thing. Like for a long time, it was literally just like, I have no idea what I'm going to do with my life. I had studied early child development before that and worked with children, and then was a doula. So I did birth work, and that was like what I was good at and found being in, but it wasn't like my purpose. Like I kind of knew that. And this idea of building a business as a nutritionist and a health coach is like, didn't really solidify for me until I got into my 30s. And now, like in hindsight, it's like, dude, you could have done this when you were in your 20s. Like you were helping people with their health and like passionate about nutrition from the beginning, but there's just like levels of maturity and like lessons you have to learn before you can get to a place where you feel confident in doing something, I guess.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, I was going to ask what changed for you that you kind of felt empowered to do it on your own, but was it just age pretty much? Just the kind of the confidence that comes with age?
Yeah, I think it was just going through like so much experiences with my own health and getting sucked into, I mean, I haven't worked with a conventional doctor since I was like 19 or 20. And so the doctors that I worked with in my 20s for my chronic illnesses were all integrative, and they helped me in certain ways and other ways failed me and didn't really help me understand more of my own body. And so just going through my own journey of like working with professionals and experts that didn't necessarily give me the support I needed, even though they all had something of value to offer. So it got to a point where I realized like, wow, there's a lot to healing, and I really want to put all the pieces together and like help other people. Like that's actually one of the most like for me, it's the ultimate way of learning is through applying it to other people, to other people's health.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That, real life exposure.
Yeah. Like I've learned just as much from working with my clients and doing research for them than I did in school. For sure.
Yeah. I feel like it kind of correlates to what Danielle and I do as far as like, we could have gone to business school.
Yeah.
Or you kind of just like jump right in and start to figure it out yourself. Because that real life application, you learn so much through it.
And you learn it in a different way. It's like it resonates more because through experience, you are like, oh, I know this is the way that things are supposed to work. I'm supposed to do things, or I don't know. I feel like it's a better way of learning sometimes.
I mean, I think everyone needs it in life, like the direct hands-on learning, but some people do like really well in the school system. Like some people, I was actually just talking with someone about this, like, I took all these hard sciences and put myself through that. And it took a lot of time and energy and focus for me because it wasn't easy. And it really did kind of go in one ear and out the other. Like I learned a lot, supposedly, because I took all these classes. But now, as I'm getting much more interested in understanding the biochemistry of nutrition and like why so many different people who apply nutrition do it in a way that's not actually accurate or complete or helpful, especially for women. And so as I get into that more, I'm like, I need to understand this biochemistry more. And so I'm learning it, like relearning it from like podcasts and like people that deliver it in a way that I can more easily receive. And I'm applying it while I'm learning it. So there's a big difference in that end. Like, I think if you're in business school and you're not actually running a business while you're in business school, for some people that are more self-directed learners, it can be really hard to absorb and like retain that information.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things when I first met you that you brought up was ancestral health and eating in a certain way. And that was one of the things that I wanted to bring you on and have you share about, because it's a topic and a mindset that I haven't heard from anyone else other than you. And you really introduced me to looking at the way you eat and fuel your body in like a certain way. So could you share about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's really helpful to kind of zoom out in order to understand like what's good for us, or, you know, why we might be struggling in the ways that we are, or what makes sense beyond just like hyper focusing on a study or studies, is to like zoom out and kind of look at, like I have a lesson in the first module of my course called Evolutionary Lens, where you look at health through the lens of evolution, and you look at different points throughout history and prehistory for humans, and what changed our health, you know. And so our ancestors could be as recent as like right before the Industrial Revolution, or even just like our grandma, so like for beginning of the Industrial Revolution. But it could also be like pre-agricultural. And so looking at these different periods is really helpful to kind of help us understand our own behavior and also our dysfunctions and our diseases. And so everything that we're doing now in the modern world is incredibly new for us. Like 99.9% of our existence was spent hunting and gathering. Like the largest scale of human existence was in that Paleolithic era. And so kind of understanding a little bit about what that means and can be super helpful to readjust your diet so that your body is actually getting the food that it knows how to work with. And so a lot of the modern disease, which we have like an epidemic of chronic illness that we didn't even have like 100 years ago, is coming from this fact that we have this genetic mismatch. So our genes are designed to expect certain things from our environment, including food, and then we have this certain environment that's different. It's mismatched from what we were designed to need. And so understanding what our ancestors were eating, again, even just like you can look back 100 years ago and see what our grandma and what our grandparents were eating, and see the like stark contrast between what they're eating and what we're eating now. And food, even though we cannot change our genetic code, epigenetics is the field of where we look at how the environment changes the organism's expression of genes. And so you can actually change the way that your genes are expressed through your choices. A big component of like the niche that I practice in and my approach, especially with women, because we're way more sensitive to stress than men are. Stress is a really, really big one. And like modern living is really stressful. Like we don't really think about, and of course, none of us were alive, hundreds, thousands of years ago. So it's hard to say, like there was horrible conditions back then too. But I'm talking about like unremitting chronic stress that we all live with, that our bodies were not, that we synthetic lighting on at all hours of the night, or like all of these, again, like foods that are processed to the point where our bodies can't break them down and can disrupt cellular functions. All of the like thousands of toxins that are introduced into our system every year that were never in existence before the Industrial Revolution. These things are a stressor on the like cellular level. And so living with that kind of stress every day will contribute to disease states.
Yeah.
And lower quality of life. And so using your ancestors as kind of a model of like what worked for us can be really helpful. It can also go too far. Like there's people in the ancestral health, sphere that will look at things that we used to do and justify why we should all be, like the paleo movement does this to some extent. Like no one should have dairy or like grains. Like people can get really fanatical about it, and also just assuming that because our ancestors did it, it's always good, or because something is modern, it's always bad, is just like bad thinking. And there's a lot of things that our ancestors did because they were living out of survival all the time. And so fasting is one of them, where I'm just like, for most people, most of the time, like fasting is a bad idea. And I used to be on that train until I like started to really understand what it does to the metabolism. I think a lot of people who promote fasting are zooming in on like a very specific function, like mechanism in the body that fasting enables, or they're just like driven by ideology because our ancestors used to fast and it was good for but it's actually a huge stressor to remove food from your system,
or it gives you permission to like not feed yourself, because I feel like some people
a lot of people.
get off on that on some
Totally.
level.
It's a control thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a stressor. When you remove, this is why I encourage women to eat breakfast right away. It's such a big deal because, well, first of all, again, in the context of modern living, we're all stressed and most of us have blood sugar imbalances. So you go 8 to 10 hours without eating, which is what we all do at night, and then you wake up and your body has no food, has no stored glucose left. And so what our bodies does when we don't have fuel for our cells is it uses stress hormones to fuel our body. So you wake up and your whole system starts working. We are running off of stress hormones. We might not even notice it because it's been happening for so long. It's like the water we're swimming in. But if you've been fasting or dieting, then that's for sure what's happening on some level. Yeah. And that's like, I think a lot of people, I had like a serious influx of followers when I wrote this ebook advocating for animal foods a few years ago, and was going to partner with people to promote it and everything. And so a lot of people in the like vegan, paleo, carnivore community wanted to support me and started following me on Instagram. And then as soon as I started promoting eating carbs, I lost a whole bunch of them. And as soon as I started writing about the dangers of fasting, I got some of them that were like upset and would be like, but our ancestors didn't need to eat that. And I'm like, I mean, our ancestors did so much whack shit too, like infanticide and like, I mean, just like a lot of like crazy tribal stuff that was based on beliefs that have been disproven. And I mean, again, there's so many different like things that you could base your like choices on, and just doesn't make sense to me. And then a lot of times, honestly, people who are like really emotionally advocating for restrictions and fasting, if you go and look at if they have like an Instagram, they look really hungry. Like women who look like they have 0% body fat.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not healthy for a woman. You know, we actually should have fat. And if you are stressed, you'll probably have more fat or you'll need more fat. So, yeah, so that's the dark side of the ancestral movement, I think. But there's a lot of like rich wisdom and understanding. And I have some books, actually one of the best books, if I were to like list off books for people to read, is called Deep Nutrition. Why your genes need ancestral foods or something like that. I have it on my bookshelf. And she actually goes into how our bodies are designed, like our facial features, our dental health, like all of these things that our genetic code is designed to create for us will get disrupted if your body doesn't have these like ancestral foods. And some people can go vegan for longer or at all because their parents ate well, or because they started with great hardware.
Yeah.
And so it really just depends on where you're coming from, whether or not you can handle these like restrictions and like stressful ways of eating.
So how does one study their own ancestral health? Like, because you said it's different for everyone, obviously, based on who our ancestors were, where they lived, what they ate. How do you even begin to figure that out?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think like you could also just learn about humans. That's a great way to just like a baseline to learn about humans. And then because we all share a lot, like we are all individual, of course, but we share so much of our DNA and like basic needs for things. You could get your ancestry report. We're doing like, I did 23andMe, but I think Ancestry is more reputable these days. Interview your parents and grandparents, or like try to figure out more about your background. I also have like my clients, often, not always, but I'll have them interview their parents and also like look into what their parents were doing when they were born. Like what were they eating, where were they born, like were they vaginal birth, were they breastfed? These things are really useful to know so you can get an idea of what you started with, because our health issues don't just start when they start showing up disruptive symptoms. Like they evolved over time. And so
And ideally, how far back do you look? Because like it sounds like you can go back to like caveman times, but like ideally, is it just like the last few generations that you should be looking at?
I mean, it's not so much should. It's more just like, do you want to?
Right.
It's like you can't really change anything that happened before anyways.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of like how interested you are. I'm really interested in history and like looking at like connecting dots and stuff, but I don't even know, because my parents were kind of gypsies, and we never knew anyone in my dad's family. Like he left his family and then joined my mom built this, their family, and they kind of removed themselves. My grandpa, my mom's dad, was already dead by the time that I was old enough to have known him, and my grandma's now dead. So I don't have any relatives, any very much extended relatives now, and it could be helpful to know these things. It's just not, for me, it hasn't been a huge priority, and I did my ancestry, and that was really interesting too, because there's a lot we don't really know until we look at the ancestry and the genes and stuff, and you can learn like kind of different places where you like. I have a percentage of Native American, and there's a lot of alcoholism and addiction in my family, and who knows, like there could be a correlation there between that, and so it's interesting, but it's all just theory,
Right.
You brought up just stressors in everyday life and how whether we're like recognizing it or not, and we could just be functioning on stress and not even realize it. Is there anything that you would recommend or that you see like your clients doing that helps them as far as managing that stress?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Eating every 3 to 4 hours. Like regardless of whether you think you're hungry, like you just eat every 3. So I think a lot of people these days will see it as like a strength to not be hungry. There's also like, I've seen this again a lot in the like carnivore keto world, where it's like you lose your appetite. It's, as if that's like a good thing. And especially women are really susceptible to that, like anything that will take their appetite away. But you actually should have a strong appetite. So if you wake up in the morning and you're not hungry, which is a lot of people, and you skip breakfast, your body is running on stress. That's why you're not hungry. So making sure that you're eating every 3 to 4 hours, if that means eating a snack before bed and eating up. These are all things, this is like counter to what women have been told forever, and so eating more. Making sure you're getting your minerals, that's a big one, because our body runs off of minerals. Like every chemical reaction in our body is reliant on minerals, including like creating hormones, creating enzymes, creating neurotransmitters, detoxing. Everything requires minerals, and it's not really on people's radar. And so making sure that you have mineral balance, that you have enough minerals, and that the ones that you have are balanced in the right way. Sleeping, obviously. So like getting to bed on time, and this is a big one for modern people because we have this electricity and technology like smartphone and laptop and stuff, and so we can stay up until all hours of the night, and this will hijack our stress response and disrupt our sleep, and it will become a pattern that it's hard to get people's health in order when they have these underlying stressors that are like constant assault. Mm-hmm. So not eating enough, nutrient deficiencies is a really big one. Not sleeping enough, I can definitely like fall into that category. Not sleeping enough and not getting to bed on time and not getting like high quality sleep because of all the things that you're doing that are disrupting your sleep patterns. I'm trying to think of what else. Having like healthy and enriching relationships is a really big one to like lower your stress load. Like we all need each other, and we need to be touched regularly, and we need to like have reassurance and support and like emotional connection with people like regularly. And that's at like an all-time low right now. And so that's a really big one. Like, and I think especially for women, we're social creatures, and we need each other. Mm-hmm. And we can often forget this. And a lot of us kind of have like default relationships where we just have relationships with people because they're around us. We grew up with them or we work with them, and we don't always think about how they're affecting our health. And that becomes a stressor, because if you're not getting your needs met there, then it's your tolerance can go down. Yeah. So like it's pretty common for women to get like hypersensitive, like they're reacting to everything. Mm-hmm. and not having enough support and even just being touched enough, it can be a big component to like calming their nervous system down and allowing their body to calm down, so it's not seeing just about everything as a threat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. Within my human design, that was something she told me, was like, you will like regulate so much faster and calm down from something if someone just like puts a hand on you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh. And then when I'm upset, I like like look at my partner and I'm like, just like touch me or like hug me or like do something. And he just like stares at me kind of crazy and puts a hand on my knee and I'm like, okay, I guess that helps. But
I love that because I feel like that's not an automatic thing. Like usually if you're stressed out, I know for me, I'm like, stay away from me. Like I need to be in my space. So that's funny that that's like the one thing you probably need in that moment is like a hug or someone to touch you. But you're like, no.
I think it depends on what this experience, like some people, if they're in their like trauma response or something. I do like I've done somatic experiencing, which is a kind of trauma therapy. And I've also like recommend it. And I have a lesson in my course on trauma where I talk about somatic experiencing and how you can actually do it yourself. You get better at regulating yourself when you have someone to help you regulate. And a few of the things that you do when you're in when you're traumatized or you're in that response or you're triggered is one of them is like grounding, so touching things. So like when I get really upset over something, usually it's a relationship thing that tends to spiral me the most. I will touch the walls. You need to find ways to keep yourself grounded in your body. Look into other people's eyes or even look into the mirror and look in your own eyes because you need to like, again, anchor and keep yourself from disassociating. So like if someone's in that experience, they may not want to be touched, which would make sense, but there is a period within that experience where you do need to be touched. Like it actually does help you, anchor you.
It like disrupts it.
It disrupts it, and it keeps you from disassociating, which is a really common thing to do when you're triggered or you're traumatized.
Or I feel like I get in this mode of like, you don't understand, like I'm so alone. And then the second you realize like, I'm human too, you're like, oh, okay, you care, you like me. Okay, thanks for coming.
I'm alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then with the stressors, a big one, I think, well, there's two big ones that I think are important to just mention. One is the toxin piece. Like this is really big. And I think it's one of those things where people can go crazy over it, where this is kind of what I experienced in the first half of my 20s with people. Like I do think that in the vegan community and even in the raw food community that I was a part of, people can be really, really big on food quality, toxins in food. And this can be misconstrued in the vegan community too, because they will start to like anything that comes from an animal is toxic, which is not true and can be very confusing. But there's a lot of, and chemicals are everywhere. So this whole anti-chemical, all natural trope doesn't really hold up under scrutiny. However, synthetic chemicals that have been created, since the Industrial Revolution are things that we don't actually know how the body does not know how to deal with. And so like take the kidneys, for instance. Like the kidneys is really good at filtering. That's like what it does. But it's actually designed to filter like bacteria and like metabolites from our hormones. And so it doesn't really know how to filter constant exposure to chemicals that we're consuming in our food or our products or putting on our body. So that's a lot of work for your body to be doing all the time. And if this is not on your radar, which it's not on everyone's radar, that's from the time that you're born until you die, you're just consistently taking in more and more. And what that does is like our kidneys and our livers, I'll just take two channels of elimination. They do so many things for us. Like everything from they play roles in nutrient absorption and getting toxins removed, converting nutrients from one thing to another thing, filtering blood. There's so many things they do, and they can't do all that stuff efficiently if they're also dealing with stress of these toxins. And so it is actually a really big deal. And I've been living in kind of a bubble for years where I'm surrounded by people that have that on their radar. But like my most recent relationship, he didn't have that on his radar at all. And so I'd go and stay at his apartment and it was like, and I like started wanting to throw stuff away. And I felt like it was a touchy subject because you don't just want to go, especially because he was like a man and he had kind of a dominant personality and presence, and it didn't go well for me to just be like, so everything in your bathroom needs to go. But I started to get like really stressed because I was like, I know the actual mechanisms in his body that are being damaged by all of this trash. And it was just not on his radar at all. And I think he's like, well, I don't believe the hippie shit is any better, is what he said. And I remember thinking like, well, yeah, I mean, there's definitely like greenwashing where you go to Whole Foods and there's like a whole bunch of shit that's really expensive to replace the stuff that you were using. And you could just get some Castile soap, you could literally just get bare bones and you'd be fine. So that needs to be on, I think, more people's radars, the chemical piece. And not just this, I mean, especially the stuff we bring into our homes, because this is the one place we have control. Like, we don't have a lot of control, unfortunately, over all the crappy shit that industry does. But in our own homes, we can choose what we bring in. And so that's a way to protect ourselves and to mitigate our stress level, because it is a stressor. Like, when we think of stress, we think of like sitting in traffic or, making bills on time, but it's literally just like metabolic assaults every day.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one is technology and being plugged in. Like, that's a really big stressor that and I think it's just getting a lot worse before it gets better. But like being on our phones all the time, like scrolling social media all the time, our attention spans are getting shorter. Our inability to like keep eye contact and like interact with each other in some basic ways, how we consume information, which then impacts how we view the world. So those are things that I feel like. There's one person that said online recently that like cell phones are going to be seen as like cigarettes one day or something like that, right? Just like ways that they're unquestioningly being used.
That's funny you say that, because I don't know where it was, but I heard that, like one day we'll look at exactly what you said. We'll look at cell phones, like how we do cigarettes, where it's like, oh, if you're going to use that, you go outside. Like, do not use that in this space.
Yeah.
That's not allowed to be used indoors.
Yeah. And it's like, if you're using it practically where you're like, oh, like, I have to call this person to ask for something that's relevant, or I have a list on my phone I need to consult for shopping, but that's not like how we're doing it as a culture. Like, and all you have to do is just walk around or drive around and see how many people with underdeveloped brains, because they're under the age of 25, are on their phone. Like, they have them in their hand, they have them when they're walking, crossing streets, they have them when they're with their friends. And that's a stressor. Like, that's a like legit stressor to your system, to have constant information being filtering constant, like, superficial short snippets of information. Like, that actually is like what that does to your nervous system and the way your brain works is pretty wild. And so that's something that I encourage people to do, is like, I even ask some of my clients that are more clearly like fast paced and higher stress, like, how much time do you spend just like staring at the ceiling, like just doing nothing, like sitting? A lot of them are just like, I don't think I do that.
Yeah.
And that's like one that I think or because my bath is like a non-negotiable, so I'll just take my phone in and I'll do two things at once. And then it got into like checking emails, writing client, and I would tell my therapist that, and he's like, no. He's like, no more phone in the bath, Kymber. And I was like, oh, I'm so glad I told you, because now I have someone to hold me accountable.
Yeah.
So I only take I take a book in the bath. And for the first few times, it was like really uncomfortable. I felt naked. I was like, well, what if I need to check the time? Like, you're in the bath. Like, why do you need to check the time? Like, what if someone texts me? It's like,
Yeah, I know, it's so weird. We're like, so it's like a second or a third limb that's like so attached to us all the time.
Yeah.
And that, to me, like, when I have downtime, that's what I do. I'm on my phone. That's kind of crazy, because like you said, it makes so much sense. You're processing so much information. Like, it's not downtime.
No.
Your body is still working. You're not just, it's crazy.
Yeah, there's a really great book. I loaned it out and didn't get it back, unfortunately. But it's called, what is it called? The subtitle is Ancient Brains in the Modern World. Something Wired. I forget. But it's written by this really brilliant evolutionary biologist or psychologist, and I can't remember which, but he studies the way addiction and the way that we from an evolutionary perspective, and the ways that we accrue information and filter information, and he talks about how humans are information foragers. Like, that's what makes us unique as species, that we have evolved culture because we can filter information very quickly. We have all these biases. We have the ability for abstract reasoning and abstract thought. And so it's in our nature to seek information, and not just like, PubMed article, but literally like sights and sounds. There's different levels of information. There's the most basic rudimentary, which I think that we're probably have the most experience with, like senses from the environment, like are we under threat, like, you know, but also like now it's moved so quickly, the advancements and the kinds of information that we receive and how fast we receive it. And so his whole point of this book was we're hijacking ourselves. Like we have created a world that is working counter to the way that we so working counter to what we actually need to have brains that work well. And so we're constantly under stress because of, so that made me think of that when you're talking about, so you can be laying in bed like super cozy and your body is actually producing more cortisol because you're scrolling through social media, and you might even be taking in information about social status. You don't even realize you're taking it. As women, we do that way more. Like it's way more of a problem for women to go on social media and compare themselves to other women or just feel bad about themselves or their lives because of what they're seeing.
Yeah.
And that's a stressor. And so that's a big one that I talk with women about, is like spending less time on social media, being more intentional with just how they use technology in general, and getting outside more and spending more time in nature and more time unplugged.
Yeah. I could definitely implement more.
I know,
in my
this
life.
we're both so
I mean-
silent as you're talking. Because
I
I'm just
mean-
like, yes, okay, noted.
I'm gonna
Noted.
work on
You
that.
can know it, you know, you can know it intellectually, but it's one of
Yeah.
those things where you don't, like, cut yourself off from your phone and go for a hike and see how you feel. Like you'll feel really uncomfortable. You'll
Yeah.
feel naked. You'll have to like be alone with your thoughts and your sensations. So it's a real thing.
Yeah.
What a confronting topic, but I think it's so important for everyone to hear, because we're so comfortable with all of these distractions. You know, it makes life a lot more comfortable. And I think it's like you were saying, it's okay to be uncomfortable, and you grow in those ways. I think when you put yourself in those situations.
Yeah, and the technology, I mean, I have a business because of internet and because of really Instagram has like given me so many clients and in business engagement. And so there's upsides too. It's more of just like, again, understanding from like not even a moralistic perspective, but from a purely like scientific perspective, like the human brain is not designed to handle this well. So you're going to have to intentionally create boundaries with yourself and become more aware of how you're using these things, or they will use you and they will hijack your stress response daily.
Use it, don't let it use you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like
Easier
that.
said than done.
So real quick, is there anything that you see people make the mistake of perceiving like a choice they make as a healthy choice, but in reality it's not?
There's so many of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, and because I work with health-oriented women who have already been in the health, like they've already been eating healthy and like working on their health for oftentimes for years before they come to me. I get to see that all the time, like what is and isn't working. And so there's many, but I'm just trying to think of some of the bigger ones. One of the big ones that I like to tackle, and I have like live classes that I lead for this is the topic of overly using dietary restrictions. Like this is a really, if you in the nutrition world, a lot of times the application of nutrition is somewhat like reductive and superficial. And so if someone has a skin issue or a digestive issue or an energy issue or a mood issue, oftentimes they're told to remove a food or take a supplement. Like those are the two things that are, and I've done some deep dives where I go on YouTube and I like, you know, look up all kinds of conditions, things that I might be dealing with or things that are just common in my clients. And usually the like influencers who have like thousands of people looking and watching and liking and subscribing will also be saying, remove dairy, remove gluten, remove grains, remove meat. And that doesn't actually give anyone an understanding of what's really happening. And then women just end up with more and more foods that they shouldn't eat. And so that doesn't work. Like that's not a good solution to healing or to being healthy and to eating well. And there is a such thing as eating foods that don't work for you. Like I genuinely feel like there's certain industrial foods like vegetable oils that we have been told were healthier than saturated fat and animal foods. They're absolutely horrendous for us. That was probably one of the introductions to our lives that has done the most damage across the board, is vegetable oils. And like,
what are some examples? Is olive oil a vegetable oil?
Olive oil is a fruit,
Okay.
and olive oil, if it's like pure olive oil and it's not cut with something, because a lot of olive oil now has vegetable oil added to it, it's fine. It's sensitive to heat, so it can oxidize. So like not frying food in it would be a good idea. Coconut oil is also not a vegetable, so that doesn't fall into the same category. Some people are really into avocado oil. I personally I think it's better as far as like how it responds to heat. I'm not a fan of it. I think I just hate the taste of it, and I think it's a lot of work, like environmentally, and even like there's wars being waged over avocados. So to make something like that, so I mean, personally, I'm like, it doesn't make sense. It would make more sense just to use like coconut oil or butter. But vegetable oils would be like pretty much anything that is in a processed food: sunflower oil, safflower oil, canola oil, corn oil, cottonseed oil. I'm just trying to think, rapeseed oil, or that's not even, that's actually canola. Grape seed oil. These are all, you'll see them in every packaged food. Most restaurants cook with them, and they have a really interesting history. Like you can actually look into the history of Crisco or margarine or canola oil, and they're not, once you understand how they're grown, how they're processed, and then what they do in the body at the cellular level, you're like, how is this being promoted for health? And then you realize, wow, it's actually like, it's about money. Like it's all about money. Like these crops are grown in mass quantities, and they can be produced fairly cheap and then put into everything. So they are fillers, and they cause so many problems in the body. Everything from like contributing to insulin resistance to inflammation throughout the body to the way that cholesterol works in our body. I mean, there's just so many things that our bodies, so many reactions that our bodies have to these oils that I think have been demonizing other things for, including like sugar. Like, people think that, anyways, it's going down the long tangent, but that's a really bad one. And I think that's one that a lot of us have been told was a healthier alternative, especially like our parents' generation. And we're starting to realize that was just like, I think that's one that people are really starting to catch on. Yeah. But it's hard because they are in everything. Like I've definitely done like some experiments where I would go to a health food store, like Lassen's, and go and look in their frozen food section because I was lazy and I wanted to get like something frozen to heat up. And there wasn't one thing that I could find across the board that didn't have cheap vegetable oil in it.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're just consuming them in mass all the time, and they're changing the ways that our skin responds to the sun. They're changing the way that we like age from the inside out. They're changing our hormones. They impact our estrogen levels in our bodies. The way our cells use insulin, and so the way that our blood sugar will fluctuate, the way our brains operate.
So do you recommend, when possible, just making things at home from scratch? Like, is that the best way to?
Yeah. I mean, eating out is fun. Like I totally get it, and I'll do it on occasion. But I genuinely feel like you're not really getting high quality food when you eat out most of the time. Like unless you're going to like super nice restaurants all the time. It's like, who can afford that? Or who wants to afford that? I guess. It makes more sense to eat at home. And I think a lot of people have this idea that you have to like be a gourmet chef or something to eat at home. But like, I'm not that great of a chef. I mean, honestly, I'm really lazy when it comes to kitchen. I eat super simple food, and I keep getting people saying like they want me to. Keep getting requests of like what I eat in a day posts. And I'm gonna do it, but I'm like, man, like you guys are not gonna be that interesting. You guys are not gonna be that excited.
Yeah. When I've eaten with you, you eat
simple food,
and like it's separate ingredients, if that makes sense. Like you're like
a carb and fat and protein.
Here's my vegetable. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
like I'm not making tacos every night. You know what I mean? Maybe you.
Yeah,
do,
no, I don't. I really don't. And I have like specific. There's reasons. There's certain things that I just don't eat. I have like there's certain spices that don't work for me, and then I genuinely like my foods. I don't ever eat food that I don't enjoy, but I just don't. That's not a high priority for me. The quality of the food is a high priority, but the gourmet, it really is not. Like it just, in a relationship I have gotten, and when I'm dating someone or something, I'll like get more spicy in the kitchen, because it's like this person is gonna have to want to eat it too. Yeah. And so, but I think a lot of people have this block with eating at home because they think that it needs to be any certain way, and that's complicated. And I think as long as you have you have protein and carbs and fat in the right ratio, and you're getting them from a good source, then you can't go wrong.
And do you kind of gauge, like if you're trying new foods, do you kind of gauge, because you said there are certain things that don't really agree with you, do you just kind of gauge at the end, like, how do I feel? Like, and then if you feel good after a meal, you're like, I'm going to eat more of this. Like, how do you figure out the things that you should be eating and you shouldn't be eating, even if it is like high quality foods?
Yeah. Sometimes it really is just experimenting and seeing how I feel after certain things. I have certain things I've been working on for years. Like I have IC, interstitial cystitis, which is like chronic bladder. And it's gotten better over the years, and I kind of understand more. I also have some helping them has been really great with helping myself. My bladder, just there's certain things that just not like, certain spices. And so I know that, and I just actively choose not to consume them. It's not like a big deal, but it means that a lot of seasonings, a lot of like things eating out, like there's just certain things that I know, like, is that really worth it? Because I'm going to be having like bladder pain. And so that's my thing. Also, there's certain foods that I just don't like. I a lot of nuts or seeds, don't really tend to advocate for them. I don't really eat a lot of raw vegetables. I'll have maybe like a side salad sometimes if it's really hot and I'm craving it. But I think there's a lot of foods out there that we have. And so a lot of health-oriented, health-seeking people eat them, actually realize they're not contributing to them feeling well. They may not even notice, but like salads are often really hard on the system. Like, and again, I'm not making anyone wrong for eating salads, but that's a lot of roughage that breaks down to not all that much nutrients. And so you're not really getting much glucose for your cells. A lot of the like nutrients that are in the greens that are touted so much don't get absorbed because it's so much roughage that it ends up making its way down into your bowels and then feeding the bacteria there. So, and a lot of like cold frozen things are also, they have to be warmed up to 98.6 degrees before we can even absorb them. So there's certain things I've learned. Like I used to love smoothies. Like every morning I'd have a smoothie, and now like I'll have smoothies sometimes. Like maybe if I'm working out, like a little mini one, but like not really frozen. I won't really use frozen fruit anymore. And because I just learned that like it actually cold. I get cold. Like I can feel my body is colder, and like it takes more digestive energy to bring that food up to 98.6 degrees before it can be utilized by the body. Mm-hmm. And then it also tends to bring more air and oxygen into my small intestine, which will feed bacteria there. So
if I ever make a smoothie, I swear it sits on my table for like an hour before I even drink it because intuitively I'm like, it's too cold. But once it's like room temperature, I'm like, okay, I'll drink it now.
I'm the opposite.
Smart.
I'm like, I like AC.
Yeah, and I actually like cold stuff too. So like, but I get cold, like my thyroid tends to run low, which is like so common. And I feel myself feeling colder. And it will also like, now that I know how much more work it is to bring something that's really cold up so before it can be your guts or this thing's small intestinal issues. And smoothies a lot, especially if you're consuming them all the time, they tend to actually bring more oxygen into that part of your body that doesn't need more oxygen feeding bacteria. And so it's this interesting kind of like irony is that a lot of people with gut issues tend to want to like juice vegetables and make smoothies because it seems lighter. But that actually can contribute to those guys getting worse.
And when you refer to the oxygen being brought into your system, is that from cooling it?
It's from
warming that thing up.
It's from the process of like mixing up the vegetables and like the blending process. So just the way that it's there's like certain foods that will the process of the food and then also just like what's in the food will actually end up carrying more oxygen into your And so we have aerobic and anaerobic bacteria that live in our bodies, and like a lot of times when we have like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or which is often a lot of people have that at various points, they tend to, a lot of those bacteria that are aerobic that feed off of oxygen will set up shop where they shouldn't set up shop. And then you end up with like digestive issues and IBS and stuff as a result. It's just an interesting thing that I've noticed. I noticed it with myself for years and with other people, is that when you have digestive issues, you kind of just like naturally, maybe not even intentionally, veer towards lighter foods because you feel better. And that contributes to longer term issue a lot of times. And so kind of getting past that period of being able to diet, feeling uncomfortable when you eat more dense foods, getting past that period can actually help your gut heal.
So you mentioned earlier that you prefer to do like frequent meals. So I kind of assumed, oh, small frequent meals, but then you're saying some of the like heartier stuff is better. Do you prefer like big meals with little snacks or all small meals, or does it depend like person to person?
I mean, I think it totally depends on like your stomach. Like, I do think that bigger meals, and again, like that's relative. What's bigger a meal? Like,
Right.
a decent sized meal should happen like 3 times a day. Like, it shouldn't just be nothing but snacks throughout the day. Like, you want to actually be able to eat more. The more that you can eat, the more stable your system will be, and the longer you can go without having. If you have to eat every 2 hours or something, then that's a sign you're not eating enough at your meals. Does that make sense?
Totally.
And then having smaller meals in between those can be really helpful. I know like a lot of people have been told not to snack. Like that's a thing that we've been told, but I don't think that's, especially if you're not eating like mass amounts of nuts and like things that are going to be really hard to break down. I don't think snacking, especially if you're healing blood sugar issues and stuff, I don't think snacking is.
When I've hung out with you on like a daily basis, you prioritize eating like all day long. And I would say from observation, it's like you're eating nutrient dense foods, and maybe in smaller quantities at times, but like everything you're eating, you like know what it's doing to your body, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting too, because I don't always, I have a pretty like structured life right now. And so I don't often go out to things. And so when you've seen me, I think the last few times you've seen me, we've like gone out on day trips, and I don't think I plan well for that stuff. So, because I often won't have enough food. And it's interesting, like you have to eat more to increase your metabolic rate. So this is something that a lot of people don't really get. Like we're still riding on this perception that you eat less, move more, and that's how you stay fit. But the truth is like you need to increase in order for your cells to actually burn more energy, calories. And for a lot of people in the modern world, they are stressed. Like they've just been living a stressed lifestyle for a long time. They have stress patterns that are unresolved. They actually need to eat more because their metabolism has gone down from that stress. Everything slows down when you're stressed. And so let me take that back. So energy production slows down. Stress goes up. So you might actually feel like you're moving faster. But your energy production, your thyroid production, your sex hormone production, all of that stuff slows down. And so in order to bring your metabolic rate back up so that you're like detoxing faster, so that your energy is higher, your mood is better, you actually have to eat more. It's like essential.
All right, well, we could keep talking for hours and hours, but I know you have something going on soon, so we were going to end the conversation here. But
okay,
this has been fascinating. Danielle and I are just silently sitting here like,
just soaking it all in. I'm like, I'm gonna listen to this back and like be taking notes.
Did you have any final questions?
I mean, is there anything that like you would recommend as a collective, like each individual, like who's listening, maybe that you just see through your clients or you just see through your daily lives with society that you think, what's like 1, 2, 3 things maybe that you think people could implement? I know we talked about stress recovery, but
I think it's really important. I work with women specifically, and that seems to be like where I really want like cater most of my information. I think it's really important for men and women to know their differences. And this is like this is kind of politically incorrect right now, and but there's a lot of differences between men and women metabolically and biologically, and knowing those differences can really help. First of all, everything in this culture that we rely on for health information is not everything. Most is based on men's bodies. So like most research in medicine, even nutrition stuff, is based on men's bodies and male cultures and petri dishes. So women are getting like the shit in the stick when it comes to healthcare, and even in the alternative space. So women understanding what's going on in their own body, and like when they take information in, when they read a book or try to apply something, ask themselves if this is actually useful for them as a woman. And so knowing the differences is really, really important. And for men also, like not assuming that a woman should be doing what you're doing simply because it works for you.
And that can be difficult when you're in partnership, if it's a man and a woman, just because you're like, oh, we're going to eat together. Like we're going to eat at the same time, or we're going to like do the same activities. And I know Danielle and I, living with our partners now, we've been discussing this. So it's funny, it's been brought up. It's like, oh, like they eat so much more, or they are, like my boyfriend Dylan makes a smoothie every morning and he's like, have some. And intuitively sometimes I'm like, I don't want that. But but I'm curious if you think like men's bodies can handle more stress.
Oh, they definitely can. Like that's I mean, women are like, I think modern women don't often want to hear this, but like our biological purpose is reproduction. Like that's actually what we evolved to be doing with our bodies, and until we go through menopause. And so because of that, we are naturally more sensitive to stress in every way, because we have to protect our womb and the potential baby in it. And it's not to say need different foods necessarily. You can still eat the same meals as your partner. It's just and women actually have a greater need for consistent nutrients. Like men fasting, if fasting was to benefit anyone, which I'm still questioning, so the jury's not for that, but like would be men. Men don't have these fluctuating hormones or this reason to protect their bodies and to not push themselves into a stress state where they lose fertility. And so you can still eat the same things as your partner, but just keep in mind that like you cycle every month, and you are a different person in different parts of your cycle, and also what's going on in your life is going to impact your cycle and your fertility. Like your womb is just like listening all the time, and men don't have that. And so I just think it's a really, really important message for everyone, is that like most people do not know. Like when I tell women that women weren't even included in research studies, and like 8 out of 10 pharmaceuticals have been recalled at various points because of lack of gender research. And most nutrition, even like studies in nutritional epidemiology and research and exercise physiology, are based on men's bodies. And so women are harder to study. And then you take the birth control pill and you throw that in the mix, and it creates even more uncontrolled variables. And so for that reason, we're like sorely underrepresented, and we have the most of chronic illness. Like the majority of the chronic illness is happening to women. And so that kind of should maybe like play a role in who you take your information from, and like what influencers you follow, and when you take nutrition advice or health advice from someone that's going to be general, which it usually is, consider like, is this actually applicable to my body?
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Kymber, so much.
Thank
This
you
has
so
been
much.
eye-opening, and I'm gonna have to listen to this a couple times to really absorb all the information. But
I know,
it's
I'm
been a
ready-
blast.
I'm ready
Yeah,
to
it's
implement
great.
some of these things.
I know.
All right, bed at 8 tonight. I'm not gonna.
We're gonna have a lot of conversations.
Yeah, don't try to do it all at once.
Yeah.
No,
Backfire.
pick one at a time.
Totally.
Implement.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for listening, whoever's out there, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
I feel like I just like talked.
Oh, that was great.
A lot.